Let's talk trance in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of you, seemingly like me, thought it was handled one way, and a lot of the rest of you thought it was handled a different way, some of which is correct and not and whatnot. So let's dive into it. So back in 2014, right, when 5th edition came out, trance was interpreted as one way, and it was designed that trance was basically useless. It was, you got a 4-hour long rest, but it didn't count as a long rest. It was actually 8 hours and blah, 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 blah. And that was how it was for a long time. And me, having, again, a lot of the times, and I'll frame this out because I started playing 5th edition from the start, a lot of my frame of reference for what things are were how they were ruled originally, because that's when we all looked into the rules, and if something came out in an errata or something else and slipped past us since then, we're used to the old school rules, which is how I always thought trance was handled. Turns out, the way a lot of people were ruling it, myself included at times, that trance basically just means you take a long rest in the course of 4 hours. That's actually how it is. And that was updated in an errata in like 2017, and I just totally missed it. So let's talk about that. And the reason I bring this up is I released earlier today a top 10 video covering my top 10 favorite races, or my top 10 D&D 5e races. And because of that, I had made a comment in there about how trance is handled for elves, and a lot of you were like, no, that's how it is handled. What are you talking about? Sage Advice Compendium agrees. And then some other people were saying like, no, it doesn't. Here's some quotes and some tweets and blah, blah, blah. Well, let's look, because that's where the trick is. So right here, this is an N-World article, but here's the original Sage Advice that I remember reading. Does the trance trait allow an elf to finish a long rest in 4 hours? The intent is no. This sticks very clearly in my mind. The trance trait does not let an elf meditate for 4 hours and then feel the way a human does after sleeping for 8 hours, but that isn't intended to shorten an elf's, or sorry, they do meditate for 4 hours and feel the way a human does after sleeping for 8, but that isn't intended to shorten an elf's long rest. A long rest period of relaxation that is at least 8 hours long. It contains sleep, reading, talking, eating, and other restful activities. Standing watch is even possible during it, but no more than 2 hours. Maintaining heightened vigilance any longer than that isn't restful. In short, a long rest and sleep aren't the same thing. You can sleep when you're not taking a long rest, but you can take, you can sleep when you're not taking a long rest, and you can take a long rest and not sleep. Here's what it means for an elf. An elf can spend 4 hours in a trance during a long rest and then has an additional 4 hours of light activity. While an elf's companions are snoozing, the elf can be awake and engaged in a variety of activities, including carving a lovely trinket, composing a sonnet, reading an ancient tome of ancient lore, attempting to remember something experienced centuries before, and keeping an eye out for danger. The trance trait is ultimately meant to highlight the otherworldly character of elves and not to give them an edge in the game. That all said, if you're DM and you decide to let trance shorten an elf's long rest, you're not going to break the game. You are making a world-building choice if you do so. You're deciding that elves on a global scale are ready to re-enter I guess that's supposed to be a fight before anyone else, that they heal faster than humanoids, and that they regain their magical energy faster. Such a choice would make sense in a world where elves are the dominant race, where they not only live longer than others, but also recover faster. That is what I remember, because it was a very explicit narrative saying, no, it's not. I just checked the Sage Advice Compendium now, and it reads like this. Does the trance trait allow an elf to finish a long rest in 4 hours? If an elf meditates during a long rest, as described in the trance trait, the elf finishes the rest after only 4 hours. A meditating elf otherwise follows all the rules for a long rest, only the duration is changed. This answer has been altered as a result of a tweak to the rules for a long rest, which appears in new printings of the player's handbook. So let's go to D&D Beyond. I don't recall what the new rules for long resting are in the player's handbook, but we're going to go and look those up, because I read it, and that pretty much answers it, right? That's whatever we're looking up. We're just looking up long rest. Long rest from the player's handbook, which says, is a period of extended downtime at least 8 hours during which a character sleeps for at least 6 and performs no more than 2 hours of light activity. Okay, so here it specifically says sleeps for at least 6 hours and performs no other than light activity for 2, such as reading, talking, eating, or standing watch. If the rest period is interrupted by a period of strenuous activity, at least 1 hour of walking, fighting, casting spells, or similar adventuring activity, they must begin the rest to regain any benefit from it. Begin the rest again. At the end of a long rest, a character regains all lost hit points. They also regain spent hit dice up to a number equal to half their total. For example, if a character has 8 hit dice, he or she can regain 4 after finishing a long rest, and a character can't benefit from more than 1 long rest in 24-hour periods, and a character must have at least 1 hit point at the start of a rest to gain its benefits. So, per that, the way it reads, and I've confirmed this with Wizards of the Coast employees who work on rules and things like that, yes, it's a 4-hour long rest. If you are an elf and you trance for 4 hours, you have 100% the effects of a long rest. It's not what I'd heard in the past, 4-hour trance and then 4 hours of activity to hit 8 hours. Trance is now 100% 4-hour long rest, and that's it. All your hit points, all your spells, all of your abilities that come back on a long rest come back in 4 hours if you meditate for that time period. It also states, again, to remember for long rests, now it has to be sleep for at least 6 hours. It is not just resting and hanging out for 8 hours total. It is sleep for 6 and 2 hours of a light activity. So hopefully this answers your questions and your concerns, because enough people brought it up in the comments that I said, well, let me go check. And then I read the Sage Advice and I was like, that doesn't sound like what I remember. Then I reached out to some folks at Wizards and confirmed, yes, elves get a 4-hour long rest. Chalk that up to another thing to make elves a really good race to pick for power, metagaming, whatever you want to consider it. That's just something else to consider in the elves corner. So anyway, let me know what your thoughts are. Which school were you in? Do you remember what I remember and like confusing trance rules? Or have you been blessed enough to live in the world where trance is basically what it says it is? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you all next time.